I think everybody was under the same impression that the Cubs are going to be very aggressive this offseason and that one of their primary targets was going to be a frontline ace starting pitcher. There were no delusions about this. We knew that the Cubs were going to get aggressive in this market. We knew that they were going to go after an ace, and at some point in time, they were going to sign one. When you look at the Cubs now, you're getting ready to enter year 4 of the master plan from Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer. Now is the time. They've held back on the purse strings the past few years. Now is the time, based off of young positional players, either on the big league roster or on the cusp of joining the big league club. Now is the time to get aggressive and fill some of those vacancies and voids in your organization on your big league roster via free agency. Now is the time to use that Cubs currency power that they have a lot of right now and make some moves to augment what you've already done with the farm system. There was no doubt in my mind that the Cubs were going to spend big money on a starting pitcher and maybe even 2 starting pitchers. I'm not even sure if they're done yet. But for sure, I knew they were going to get one big-time ace because they were going to have the flexibility and the ability to outbid anybody on the guy that they wanted. It doesn't matter who it was going to be because the Cubs have so little actually spent and already allocated for 2015 and beyond that they had more financial flexibility than any team in the major leagues. This was part of the plan all along, and I understood that, and I got that, and I agreed with that. And I also agreed with this being the offseason where the Cubs made that big splash by getting a big-time starting pitcher, a frontline ace, because they had to. Because in part, they have a lack of big-time arms in their system at all levels. It's been one knock I've had against this regime of the Cubs over the past few years is that they've been so aggressive in terms of acquiring big-time power bats for the lineup that they seem to have neglected finding a big-time arm or two for the starting rotation or even the back end of the bullpen. They've picked a lot of pitchers in recent drafts, but the first-round picks are always dedicated to bats, like whether it's Almora or Bryant or Schwarber, what have you. Even the year before, even under Jim Hendry, it was Javier Baez. That's 4 straight years that they picked the bat in the first round, all the while their organization was severely and sincerely lacking in arm talent and depth throughout the organization. So I knew it was going to happen. I also know this is a team that is desperately lacking in veteran leadership and championship experience. At some point in time, if you want the team to grow and you want the team to take another step, you want the team to get better, you want these young players to be shown the way, then you have to have veteran leadership. If you want someday to have a championship team, you've got to have some guys on there with championship experience. You also are going to need that ace number 1 starting pitcher to set your rotation in place, to put everybody else in their proper role and in their proper place. There was also a need now for the Cubs in year 4 of this master plan, this rebuilding project, to make a statement. Because this won't be the last splash they make in free agency. These won't be the last big moves they make in free agency. They needed to make a statement that this is a place you want to come to if you're a free agent. This is a place you want to play. This is a place you want to be. And that the Cubs organization is about winning and they're about paying their guys. You had to make a statement here. And ultimately, as I mentioned before, the Cubs had more money to spend than anybody and more financial flexibility as an organization than any organization in Major League Baseball. And it's not even close. I mean, they have so much to spend and so much financial flexibility that we knew that this was coming. It had to happen. And now I look here, and the Chicago Cubs have acquired Jon Lester. They've given him a huge deal. 6 years, $155 million. That's a big-time money move. And I always hesitate a little bit when it comes to giving starting pitchers just that much money. It's not even just so much the fact that these guys ultimately only play basically every 5th day. It's not so much just the fact that they really only help you in one aspect, and that's throwing the ball. They really don't bring much else to the table from a baseball standpoint in theory. It's not just the fact that when you're talking about this, you're talking about pitchers that have several years of wear and tear on their arms and their bodies, and you're talking about guys that could be an elbow or shoulder injury away from being washed up and done and out of the game. It's a combination of all those factors. So I always hesitate, and I'm always concerned when I see a pitcher being given such a big-time, mega, massive deal. But the reality of the matter is, in today's game, you have to do that. You don't have a choice, because if you don't do that, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You know, you can only develop so much of your young starting pitching in-house. At some point in time, you've got to pay somebody. You've got to. And the Cubs have reached that point where the opportunity was there and they had no choice. So in terms of Jon Lester, you're talking about a pitcher that still appears to have a lot of years left in his body. You're looking at a Lester who is a legitimate frontline starting pitcher. Added bonus that he is a left-hander. Talking about a guy that's in his early 30s. So he's had a lot of mileage on his arm, but it would appear that he has many more years left to offer. You're talking about a guy who's consistently had an ERA in the mid-threes throughout his career. You're talking about a pitcher with a whip around 1.2 or so, who had an even better season in 2014. Well, not surprising, I guess that it's a contract year. But you're talking about a Jon Lester here who has made at least 31 starts in 7 consecutive seasons. He's been consistent for the most part. He's been reliable. He's made some big-time performances in some big-time games, and at times has exhibited traits of being truly dominant. And that makes him very appealing. And I understand, due to familiarity, what have you, why Theo would want somebody like this guy, especially when he's already brought in his guy now in Joe Maddon. He's found that manager. The Cubs have that guy that can lead them there. Now you got to give him some of the Jimmys and Joes to go with the guy in Joe Maddon. Well, Lester is that guy. Lester does so much of what the Cubs need. He gives them that ace. He gives them that big-time arm. He gives them that veteran in leadership and that championship experience. He's the one that allows you to set everything else in the rotation behind him accordingly and correctly. It has allowed the Cubs to make a statement around the league that they are to be taken seriously now, that things are going to get better, that they are big-time players, that they have money to spend, and when they have money to spend, they are willing to spend it. At the end of the day, this was a necessary evil. They had no choice. If I'm in Theo's position and Jed Hoyer's position, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm paying this type of money to Jon Lester because, again, it was a necessary evil for the current times of baseball and for the current state of the Chicago Cubs organization. They had to do this. This was a really good move by the Chicago Cubs. Now, some people will point to the fact that he might end up like CC Sabathia, and he could. But at the end of the day, did CC Sabathia help the New York Yankees? Yes. Did they win a World Series with him in the fold? I believe so, didn't they? How much do you really regret that if you're the Yankees? You look at the Cubs. If Lester gave you 3 damn great years and you won a World Series during that time and then his arm fell off afterwards and it was a bad contract at the end, well, you got what you needed out of him in the time that you got it out of him. So, again, I understand the concern. I understand some people's trepidation with giving this much money to a pitcher over the age of 30. But, man, you had to do it. And if there was going to be a guy for the Cubs to do it with, it was going to be somebody like Jon Lester. Now, I have some concerns in terms of Theo and Jed giving out big money because largely when they've given out big money so far in the free agent market, it hasn't worked that well. David DeJesus, Kyuji Fujikawa, Scott Baker, Edwin Jackson. I mean, that's something that gives me pause for concern because some of these big targets they've had in free agency have largely crapped out and have largely looked like colossal mistakes. And in the case specifically of Edwin Jackson, that's a huge mistake that the Cubs organization is still paying a price for and will pay a price for the next 2 years financially. It's a bad deal, and they've given out some bad deals. So I do have concerns, not because they gave a bunch of money to Jon Lester, because I think he was the right guy to give a bunch of money to, and I think he was perfect for the situation and for the organization. I just have some concerns because there's a trend and there's a pattern that when Theo and Jed give out big money, it ends up looking disastrous and ends up being disastrous. And I don't want that to be the case with Jon Lester. I want this to be an organization changer. I want this to be an environment changer. I want this to be a game-changing type move, this necessary evil being that point in time where you said the Chicago Cubs organization figured it out. The Chicago Cubs organization really truly began their acceleration and their path towards winning a championship. That's all I want before I die at this point, is the Cubs to win one World Series. The Bears have won a championship in my lifetime, and I saw that. The Bulls won 6 championships in my lifetime. I saw all of them. The Blackhawks have won a couple Stanley Cups in my lifetime, and I've seen them. The only thing missing for me, the only thing I want to see before I die, is for my God-blessed Chicago Cubs to win one World Series. And I assure you, fellow Cubs fans, that this Jon Lester deal is an indication, a sign that that is possible someday soon. This is an indication that this organization is going to be changing and changing very soon. And this necessary evil was the right decision and the right time with the right player in the right situation for the Chicago Cubs organization. I'm excited about this. And with the addition of Joe Maddon now as the manager, man, I'm a lot more excited for 2015 and the Chicago Cubs season to come than I ever envisioned I was going to be.